I don't know what it is, but people have a tendency of making life very complicated. And that also goes with self-realization, God, prayer, whatever you want to call that phenomena of being spiritual. People like to make that very complicated. Some think that you have to go into the jungles, right? That you got to run away from society. But no, that doesn't work. Because even if you go into the jungle and you run away from society, what's the problem over there? The problem is, one, you still need shelter. Right? You still need shelter. Right? Two, you still need food. Right? And you grew up in a city or structured place. Right? Do you know how complicated it is to get food in the jungle? I don't even know how to grow my own vegetables. How will I practically survive outside a functional society? I will not, right? But even these two situations here, you still got to eat and you still got to sleep. It's still action. Right? So, running away to the jungle still needs an action to make that happen. And then when you're in the jungle, you still need survival stuff, and you still need to eat and drink and sleep. It's not that you're just going to sit and meditate. Right? Are you sitting and meditating the whole time? Absolutely not. You're going to be farming. Right? You're going to be learning how to do construction. You're going to be learning how to cook. When are you going to get time to meditate and be with God? You're not. All right. So you don't run into the jungle. What do? Well, what's the next best thing that seems like a jungle? A church, a monastery, a temple. So you become a little bit practical and you run into a church or a monastery, right? Or a temple. Let's just call it organized religion, right? You run into some kind of an organized place of worship. But again, those facilities need, one, money, two, house you and feed you. How do you get that? Either someone donates and then you're living off someone else's scraps, or you work hard first and then at old age you decide that it's time to go into a monastery, become a monk, right? They have monks even in Christianity, right? They have monks in Hinduism, in Judaism. They have them everywhere. And you decide that you become a monk and you're going to meditate, right? But by this time, you're too old. You're in your 50s or you're in your 60s. Age is your limitation now. Your body is breaking down at this point. You worked hard. So you put off everything for what? Right? So this is what I'm talking about. People make God realization a very complicated topic. But it doesn't have to be a complicated topic. Right? It's very simple. This is life. Right? You took birth. right? That's you. A little munchkin took birth. And this is a line of life. Where does it go? It goes to your death. That is your reality. Death is your reality. And this is time. How much time you have to your death, you don't know. But we do know one thing. That everything in life comes from this direction. Who's on this side? And what's on this side? Right? What's on that side is very simple. Is life. Life is on this side. So what is in life? Right? So what comes from this side? Your spouse. Right? Right? Your children. Relationships. Right? Success. Failures. Happiness. Joy. Death of others. Right? How about your career? Right? Success in the career, so your social status. Right? Everything in life, whether it is good or bad, will come from this side. And what is on that side? God. God is on this side. Right? It's not about how much effort you're putting. It's not about what you're doing. Because you can reflect back into your life. All your plans, they haven't worked out. Right? If your plans had worked out, then you would have had a vision board that was never edited. But in life, what happened? You had a plan. Practicality came in, or circumstances came in. You edited the plan. And then you kept editing it, and eventually you had some result, right? But the whole time the plan was edited, right? So, and you're thinking that you've accomplished what you desired, but you haven't. You've edited the desires to accomplish where you are today. So plans don't work out, right? And what does that mean, plans don't work out? It doesn't matter how much effort you put. It doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter if you make the right decisions. All it matters is the Lord on your side. If the Lord is not on your side, no amount of effort, no amount of execution, no amount of intelligence is going to have any sway to the results. Now, what I do want you to understand is you have the choice to be on the side of the Lord or on the side of life. You're already on the side of life. If you're watching this video, you're questioning your life. You're either struggling with the good times or you're struggling with the bad times. In either case, you're on this side. All you got to do is walk over this side. Because everything comes from Him. You can't avoid it. And the thing is, even if you're on this side, the side of the Lord, that doesn't mean that you're going to magically have only good. That you're going to have all the social status. That you're going to have all the success. That you're going to have all the relationships. Just because you're on this side doesn't mean only the good's going to happen. No matter what is happening in life, everything is always going to be going this way. And you have to live life. Right? We can go over karma theory and we can go over the law of karma. They both go hand in hand. Once you understand that, then you'll understand how life functions. And you have the choice to be over here or to be over here. Now, some people think to be here, you got to be in the jungle. Or you got to... That's not true. If that was true, then this wouldn't exist. If it's in your path to run into the jungle, you will. If it's in your path to forsake life, right? Into monkhood, you will. But that is not what you should be thinking about. I want you to realize that life will continue as it is. And nothing in life will change. By becoming spiritual, what you're doing is going from here to here. On this side. That's what you're doing. You're choosing the side of the source. Right? And that's why I have this statement that I like to use. Life is bound to you, but you're not bound to life. Karma is bound to you, but you're not bound to karma. So then what are you bound to? And this is where the law of engagement comes in. We've already discussed that everything in life is experienced through the mind. Right? We've decided that we want to be on the side of God and not on the side of life. Because everything in life comes from God anyways. And no matter what our life will bring, good or bad, success or failure, loneliness or company, it's going to be coming as determined by the Lord Himself. So we're going to choose this side. And we're going to continue to live in our mansion, to drive the expensive vehicles, or to live in a regular home and drive a typical vehicle. It doesn't matter. Your economic status does not need to change. Your household does not need to change. You don't need to run away from your responsibilities. All you simply have to do is understand the law of engagement. Right? Because life is bound to you. Karma is bound to you. But you are not bound to karma or life. What does that even mean? See, life and karma are exactly the same thing. Karma, we can say, is action, that which must happen. And life is that which is happening, the results of it. Right? So what I'm telling you is, I'm telling you not to worry about what is happening in life. Not to be worried about morals or values or anything. All I want you to focus on is this bondage part. And that comes from engagement. Where you are engaged, that means emotionally. Mentally. Right? Like, what are you thinking? Are you caught up in the event? The child, suppose you're married and suppose your wife is pregnant and suppose you have a child, right? The life part was the marriage, not in your control, because that marriage was bound to you, because a child had to be born, right? That spouse had to give birth to that child. You were already bound to that. Now that the child is born, are you going to be engaged? You know that the child must be born after 9 months. Where are you going to engage yourself? Are you going to engage yourself back into life? Or are you going to engage yourself from the person or from the source that gave you the spouse and that gave you the child? Where your mind is occupied, where your emotions are occupied, where your thoughts are occupied, where your feelings are occupied, where your frustration is occupied, your happiness and all of that bundle of stuff, what you consider life, they're just fluctuations of where the mind is engaging itself. You can be present in the present moment in your child's life, in your spouse's life, in your career. But at all times, you will be engaged over here. Now, how do we engage at that point, right? That is the $1 million question, right? And to do that, we need to understand that is mentioned everywhere as a secret. You know, they mention it as the Anhat Shabad. Another mention of this is Saut Asmani, right? Another mention of it is the Holy Ghost. But what's the point of all of that? Well, that's prayer, right? The true form of prayer, where you're connected to something that is not part of the physical realm. How do you connect to it? Well, that's where the spiritual architect comes in. Someone who has the ability to reform your mind so you can connect to something that's much more subtle. That's much more out of this world. What does Anhad Shabad mean? Anhad means something that is resonating, that has a sound, but is unstruck. Normally, if even for me to speak, there's a vocal cord inside striking itself against air, against the entire structure over here. If I want to make this sound, two objects are being struck. Sound in the physical world cannot exist if two objects do not strike. Even sound coming out of a speaker drum is vibrating, it's striking, there's mechanics behind it. And that's how sound is created. Now imagine that there is a much more beautiful sound that has the ability to engage your mind, to attach itself away from life, but to something right over here. So if you are able to engage with that sound along with your consciousness, and I mentioned consciousness because we discussed the other day that consciousness is you and you're using the mind to identify it. So as long as your mind exists, you're not you. The mind, you are an accumulation of everything that you have experienced, that you believe is you. But those are just layers preventing you from finding out who you are. So, I don't want to make this more complicated, but I do want you to understand that self-realization, God-realization, does not require monkhood, does not require running away from the jungle, into the jungle, does not require leaving your luxuries. In fact, what it does require is that you live the life that you're living. Continue going to work. Continue eating. Continue living your life. Taking care of your children, being responsible. But following the right technique to meditate and to attach yourself, to engage the mind away from the bondage and into the freedom. That's all it is. It doesn't require hours and hours and years of dedication. Right? If you have the wrong technique, no amount of prayer is ever going to be heard. Going to the temple, going to the church, going to the mosque. If any of your prayers were ever heard, you celebrated. If one of those prayers were not heard, you didn't break down the temples. If people followed the same rule of if God didn't listen to them, rather than questioning their faith, they questioned God and they destroyed the temples, not a single temple would ever be alive. Because the probability of praying for something and getting it is much lower than the probability of praying for something and not getting it. Because the person who's providing it is the Lord Himself, and He knows what's best for your life. He knows the path of your life. He knows why He's given you birth. He knows the difficulties that He wants you to experience so you can connect with Him. So those things that you desire, they're obviously not going to get fulfilled. So I'm not saying that if you come on this side, you're going to get everything that you want. Right? The purpose of all this knowledge is to validate your experience. Because if someone else experienced something, then you may have done something right. That's all it means. That's why all these books were written. They weren't written to be followed. They were written that if someone is following a spiritual architect, he's following a guide, he will have confirmation that the path that he's on, the actions that he's taking are correct. Right? So if you're interested in learning how to connect with your consciousness to yourself, and then being able to listen to this divine resonance, this divine melody that is resonating throughout the entire universe, if you're interested in solving the purpose of life, then connect with me and I will share the techniques, and through a structured program we will go through how do we re-engineer this mind to be able to connect to something so profound, the source energy, your consciousness, and then go into deep meditation and experience deep healing and a new life.